So here we are, Saturday night. Reflecting on the past couple of days, back to where we started. We said that we're using this technology, this Zoom technology, to explore our technology, our Zen technology of resolving life and death. And how that's not a lightweight question, a lightweight matter. And as a result, we don't use lightweight methods. We talked about what to pour into this time. And as I've had a chance to talk with a number of you, what you've poured into this time is impressive. Impressive. We've had buddies, we've had Jiki, support from Jikis, we've had being our own Jiki. And we've talked about how this training conditions us, supports us, helps us in handling a mess. How it resources us, starting physically in the body. How this development and connection to Hara gives us grounding and centeredness, a sense of rhythm and connection with life, that we can feel what's going on. How it gives a grounding and centeredness in you that supports an open heart, that supports sitting as boundaryless love. How we don't need shields up against the world when we can process what it dishes out. I've come to think of this training in this regard as integrating us head, heart, and hara, getting us coherent so that it's you at full strength, you adding up, not fighting with yourself. And yet I bet over the last couple of days you've had a couple of moments here and there where maybe you did fight with yourself, right? Just show of hands. Did that happen to anyone? Just curious. Oh, yeah? Yeah. Does that make things better or worse? It's always worse, isn't it? That's right. Because a person divided, it always goes downhill. Right? And yet, we see it. You saw it. You could just report it. That kind of civil war or tension goes on all the time, or can go on all the time, until we start to integrate more deeply, become, in a sense, in deeper connection or unity with ourselves. And then the signal we can put out into the world can be stronger, more unified, more clear, less conflicted. We talked about how in this crazy time, with wicked issues left and right, they don't solve like, an analytical math problem. We can't just look at them and figure it out and solve them once and for all. They represent deep tensions in the collective karma of our society, deep tensions in our own history, deep trauma inherited from generations past and carried in your body and mind. They don't just disappear. Energy is not created or destroyed. It just keeps changing form, changing form, changing form. And so it is with us too. But these problems can still give us every opportunity to live with compassion, wisdom, and love, to be whole and to be wholly ourselves in that moment, even in a mess. And how koan training in some ways equips us, gives us practice at how we can absorb ourselves into situations, right? Become this, become emptiness, become this mess, become climate change, become the other, go from there. And when we become, I mean, feel in yourself, when you become something, what happens? What happens? It means we're admitting some energies, we're taking something in. Energy's entering this physical body and it's starting to kick off a chain reaction. One neuron leaving to the next, where some kind of sensation is leading to perception, is leading to thought, is leading to emotion, is leading to, do I do something about this? On and on it goes, right? In you too. It means we're vibrating with something and we're taking it in and letting it become part of us. Maybe letting it change us in accordance with our nature, its nature, the conditions. And when we can live so naturally that we take it in, vibrate with it, do the action, and we move so easily between input and output, and the sound springs forth. When we can operate so easily like that, we call it the way. Way making, right? I think that's a better way to say it, right, Jeff? Way making, you know? Or you hear me talk about it sometimes, a ball on fast moving waters, or a mind that does not stop. We have different language, different ways to try to language it, but we're always saying the same thing, that there's no clunky interruption in between. No clunky I getting in the way, going like, wait a minute, wait just a minute here. Let me think about this. You know, I'm not sure this is in my interest. But it's not happening. So when we've got that clunkiness, it's a signal to us that somehow I've gotten in my way. I've gotten in there and kind of mucked up the gears a little bit. Useful to know. Useful to know, because it usually causes some kind of clunkiness. If I can just resonate clearly with what is going on and do what is mine to do, in a way, I say it's the easiest way to be, to lead, and the hardest. It's the easiest because it's most joyful. It just feels good, like flying like a bird, right? It just feels good. It's hard in that somehow the resisting self has to get out of the way. Well, I bet you got to know something about the resisting self over these last couple of days, right? That's what sesshin or keishin is so good for, of pushing the limits of what's comfortable, not comfortable, tolerable, not tolerable. Sometimes we get to a point in this training where we go, this is just too hard. Right? And yet something in us saw us say that and didn't fall for it because you're still sitting here. Or we're in the middle of some sit that has gotten, you're thinking about, we're to ring the bell, usually with an expletive somewhere before bell, one or more, right? But something else in you is just going like, what the, it's like, who cares? It's like, part of you is going, my ankle hurts. And another part's going, eh. Did you notice that? How the witness doesn't actually get consumed in the fire? Did you notice that? In addition to how the koan training helps loosen us up to get us unstuck from an I that likes to get its way, we also see how useful suffering can be as a teacher. Not only for us individually, but for our society. Because it makes people hungry for answers, willing to dig deeper, wanting to heal. And that's where we are now, in an incredibly painful time, a time of suffering. But as we would say, the good news is that's the tool, or you heard me use the word prop, right? That's the tool we can use to lead people out of all suffering. So let's look at suffering for just a moment. And in that regard, I'm thinking about the four noble truths, where the first one is life is suffering. Life is dukkha. Dukkha is the word that's used. And Jeff, I really am grateful to you for the reference that you gave us around this, because I found it so interesting to really explore what dukkha meant, what dukkha, the translation, because I'd heard the life is suffering thing, and I thought, well, that's kind of one-sided. I mean, life has some joyful parts too, right? But when you really penetrate what dukkha means, it's not just suffering. It's not just ordinary suffering. It includes ordinary suffering, but it also includes anything that changes. Well, now that's a pretty big space. Any conditioned state that includes sensation, perception, emotions, mental formations, consciousness, subjective experience. It includes all of that. All of that is in the word dukkha. Dukkha includes impermanence. It includes anything with moving parts. It includes attachment to things, and it includes detachment from things. In other words, it includes anything moving, what we might call the guests of life, as distinct from the host. The comings and goings of life. The comings and goings of life. And out of these different conditions and these comings and goings, an I emerges that thinks it exists, that defines itself by a whole set of mooring lines or connections to the conditions around it, and sort of reincarnates itself moment by moment. That's what it's doing. We don't see it, but that's not because it's not happening. We don't see it because of the limits of our perception. And because the eye that perceives is kind of the thing coming and going. So anytime it looks, it's there. Sort of circular, but that's what happens. Moment by moment, we die, we're born, we die, we're born, we die, we're born, or we're in and out of life in a sense. I don't know how to say it. The words are not, the words aren't quite there. But we have both this energetic nature and a material nature. And the boundary we make between living and non-living matter is like this really stark boundary. We think we know what we're talking about until, something like a coronavirus shows up and we really see the power of something right at the cusp of living and not living. And you see how much power it can have to do stuff, right? But viruses technically are not alive. They only do their damage when they can get into a living cell and make copies of themselves. I was always fascinated by this. It's this little piece of organic matter, little DNA or RNA, little wrapped in protein. It's a molecule. Complex, but a molecule. There are a couple of molecules. And yet, so the boundary between life and non-living isn't as strong as we think it is. And the boundary between life and death isn't what we think it is either. So I is moment by moment recreating itself. And that moment, this moment, is where creativity happens. This moment is in how we engage it, is where the shift happens. If there's shift. So we say that life is all this impermanence, and yet we derive a sense of a continuing or a permanence out of it that we call I. It's not true. I mean, it's not our greatest truth, I'll put it that way. There's a kind of conventional usefulness to it. If we actually changed our name every time we reinvented ourselves, we would not know what to call each other. It'd be a very confusing world. And we need this continuity for our own sanity. But we take it way too seriously, or we get locked into it. We get locked into this identity. And it causes us suffering because it has, and this leads to the second truth, thirst. Suffering has causes. This is the second noble truth, right? Suffering has causes. And the causes are, I has a few opinions about things and desires and thirsts and hungers, and it wants to grow and it wants to be safe and it has needs to meet. And so if life accords those things, great. If not, well, there's problems. And if it accords them now, well, maybe it won't later. So there's anxiety. So we've got this wheel turning us around. And the wonder is, to me, the wonder is that we get to see through this, that we get to see it. But seeing through it calls for some pretty strong medicine. And that's why we train with some pretty strong medicine. Sometimes we use the phrase, you have to exhaust the eye to see through it. You know, this is the last night of Sesshin. It's often a night when, or occasion, it could also be a night where we train all night. No, the first time that proposition was put to me, it was like my second Sesshin. And I thought, phew, I made it to Saturday night. And they go, oh, we're training all night. I go, oh, you've got to be kidding me. You've got to be kidding me. I mean, talk about an eye in the way, right? Talk about fighting with yourself. And people said, well, yeah, it's like college. You know, you used to pull those all-nighters. I didn't pull all-nighters in college. I wasn't good at that when I was young. I was terrible with trying to stay up all night. And I was complaining about this one time out at Josephine when we had to train all night. And you know, it was Pat Green, who saved me. She said something like, you know, like there might be something, you know, just see what happens. Like she just see what happens if you do this. So it made me curious, like what's going to happen? I was standing on the Ungawa. It must have been like 2 a.m. It's some ridiculous hour. I'm exhausted. I am just exhausted. Standing on the Ungawa, and suddenly I'm feeling the part of me that isn't tired. And this is a complete mystery to me. But it's like I could tease apart 2 aspects of my being, like the material part from the energetic part. And there it was, that part of me that's not aging. My body is for sure aging, same with you. And yet, energy doesn't age. Energy doesn't age. You know, it's like you look at your light bulb. You could tell how old that light bulb is, but you couldn't tell how old the light is. You could tell how old or tired your eyeballs are, but you couldn't tell how old the light in your eyes is. It has no age. So you start to touch this part of yourself, and you have access to this part of yourself that you go like, whoa, whoa. So that's what's on the other side of exhausted suffering. That's one of the things on the other side. It's not the only thing, but it starts to open us up to remembering, reclaiming, realizing more of who we are, more of what we have available to us. Some part of us that's not mired in the material death of the body. Whoa, that's kind of interesting. It's not caught up in the cycle of birth and death. Whoa. So you never know what's on the other side of exhaust the eye, but I invite you to discover it. Find out. It leads to the third noble truth, cessation of suffering. This can be extinguished. We drop into no form, no coming, no going, where somehow the whole picture is unfolding in you, where everything flips around. And suddenly this whole thing unfolding in you. And the true human body is the entire universe. This is playing out in you. You is not quite the same you, but this host nature, the host of the party, emerges. Which leads to the fourth noble truth, the path, the way there, the eightfold path. And I don't want to go into, I mean, each of the right understanding, right thought, right speech, right this, right that. It sounds a little bit like, you know, the 8 commandments or something. You have to do right kind of thinking instead of wrong kind of thinking. And it's not that. It's not that. It's more about this, and the sound springs forth, how to be in a condition where you're moving with life, where you're moving with, vibrating with appropriately, or appropriately is not even the word I want, but getting out of our own way. So it leads up to right mindfulness, right concentration, which is this samadhi condition of the boundaryless self, of a self without boundaries, or somehow acting through a limited self. Here you are, this portal of subjective experience in this body that you chose for being the universe with. Here you are. And in this host, in this bigness, a wisdom emerges, an ethics emerges that is based in connection and love and compassion, one witness. It says we, in the path, or the Eightfold Path, where we cultivate ethical conduct. It doesn't mean we learn how to behave ourselves. It means we operate out of a unity and oneness, one with all that is, all beings. So then you look at something like our society today, and you see it's sickness. You see, this is not ethical. This injustice is not ethical. It doesn't honor all beings. It exploits people and harms people. And it's one of the unfoldings in the whole picture. And yet, it is the pain points that we chose to show up in, because this is the time we're living in. So it's ours to work with. It's ours to heal. Or we cultivate wisdom, the wisdom of samadhi, the wisdom of connectedness, the wisdom of being the whole picture, and how that informs our thought processes. Any violence or ill will or damage done in an exploitative, me first kind of way, like using up the earth so the future generations get, because it's mine. It's off. It's a sickness. So, quote from Martin Luther King: "We as a nation must undergo a radical revolution of values. When machines and computers, profit motives, and property rights are considered more important than people, the giant triplets of racism, extreme materialism, and militarism are incapable of being conquered." So this is our mess. This is our mess. We know this. White supremacy culture does not honor all people. It does not have love and compassion for all people. So it is spiritually void. It's broken. It will lead to more suffering. It leads to more problem. It's not the way we meet the moment in the best way. And if there was a time when we didn't see it, that time is past. We'd have to be willfully ignorant not to see it now. Willfully ignorant. And once we see it, I'll go back to what Rebecca said the first night. How do we let it change us? Now I'm taking it in. I'm going to start vibrating with it. If I sincerely commit, I will let this do its work in me. And whatever is mine to do and enact as a result will come out. Okay. If I turn away from it, that's ignorance. That's ignoring it. The illness goes on. Or an earth exploitative mindset. Is not honoring taking care of the earth as our own eyes, as we were saying earlier today. It doesn't honor that. It's a violation of wisdom. So it's going to lead to more problems. It's not based in love. One of the lines I appreciated from Radical Dharma, you heard me talk about this the first night, but one of it was, I like this. This is one of those that is a good guiding line. You have to really insist upon only living within the vibration of love. Love that changes, love that confronts, love that holds you, love that allows you to make mistakes, but only with love. If we just insist on that, we'll move in the right direction. So we know suffering can be useful to lead people to salvation, as the Molly Curtis Sutra would say, lead people to salvation, because it shows the impermanence of all things. How many of you noticed the suffering that you felt during Teixing was temporary? That's right. Comes and goes, rises and falls. Sometimes surprisingly so. And so can we penetrate this time, this body, your body? Can we use the strong medicine of our training to see through the clunky self, the false self, that we can remember who we are, that we can remember who we are in totality, the universe with manual dexterity, as Jill Bolte Taylor would call it. The power of the universe with a particular set of hands and feet. Can we integrate this system through our training so that it can operate clearly and coherently? Can we tune it, relaxing it so that we're we vibrate freely. We're not too tight. Can we tame that ego in a way that we see through it? That it becomes a tool, not a tyrant. That we can vibrate with the conditions of our time and through our own love enact healing, moment by moment, in each place where our life touches now. And as for the story of our times, I don't have any particular psychic ability to say what's going to happen. But even if I did, or whether I know it or not know it, I would still say this: it's a done deal. It's a done deal, meaning it's unfolding as it will. It's unfolding as it will. What matters is how we take our place in that, true to exactly the nature that you are, exactly who you are. An image came to me as I was preparing this Teisho, of holding a child, a small child, and reading a book, reading a story. You're holding a child and you're reading a story to her or him. And the story has some happy parts and some bad parts and some scary parts and some fun parts and some wonderful parts. And you're like halfway through the book and little kid starts wondering, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? The book is written. It's, you haven't gotten to the end yet. But what was really going on, and it's going to go up and down. It's a story. It's going to have good parts and bad parts, parts you like, parts you don't like. But what's really going on is that you're reading a story to a child. How to say this? The story of the book is not the real story. The story of the relationship of the moment is the real story. That's what I'm trying to say. Engage that moment. Engage every moment. So here we are, the last night of Teisho, the last night of Teisho. You've chosen a mess, chosen to be here in a mess. Thank you. Good to have you here. As we say, let's go round up a bunch of fools who want a mess, and we'll go, they say, fill the well with snow. Take on the endless task with good joy and cheer. You've chosen a mess. You've chosen a particular instrument, a body-mind resonating instrument to live in this mess with. You've chosen a line of training that is optimizing how that resonator works. Maybe it's going to bring it to primo condition. You've chosen a kind of training that says, be ready to enter battle any moment. Because That might be how it resonates in you. It may be your time, your turn. Go without hesitation. And you've chosen to do this with a gathering of minds on this screen, bodies on this screen. So let her rip. Let her rip. There is nowhere to be lost to. Or as Buddha said, "O nobly born, remember who you are. Don't let I steal your identity. Remember who you are. See through the whole thing." Hi.